That should be better, yes. Has been an eternity of time between when we crashed out of the MLS's back tournament, and here we are, first game tomorrow. How excited is everybody? I mean, I feel like it's been another delayed start since even going into the MLS's back tournament. It feels like summer to Christmas right now.
It's been weird. It's been a very weird flow to this season.
And John, how do you feel going in tomorrow?
Hey, I'm ready to get Section 3 or Segment 3 or whatever you want to call it. I'm ready to get it rocking and rolling because I hope it leads to Section 4 and Section 5 and to playoffs and a postseason. But right now, let's take it 6 games at a time. And looking forward to action at MBS. It'll be a bit of an odd vibe without any fans there. And I know that Jason and Mike, when they call it on 92.9, they're going to have their windows open and being as vociferous as possible, making up for the 17s.
I didn't even think of that. That's probably going to be very interesting from a broadcast standpoint to be able to possibly hear the players yelling at each other from the field.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to hear some of it. Maybe not specifics, but we'll be able to hear, where you'd hear the crowd yell about something that happens. We'll hear the bench kind of get excited about things or get mad at the referee or whatever happens. It's going to be strange. Now, the team is going to do some things to try to recreate the vibe of having people in the building. There will be the PA system will be used for different things. I don't know what all is planned, actually. I'm very curious to see it. I know there's going to be some work done by the supporters groups tonight in terms of banners and visuals that are going up tonight, and that'll be in place for tomorrow, too.
All right, so John actually brought up a very interesting point, and let's go ahead and lead into this. So currently right now, Atlanta United is sitting 7th in the league. We are, or in the East, and we are 6 points total. Now, the way the structure for MLS has changed as far as teams allowed into the playoffs, it's expanded a bit. So as long as you finish within the 10 instead of the 8th spot, you get in. But we, again, are still only sitting 1 point above that red line. So it's going to be really interesting as far as how we progress going forward. Do we solidify ourselves more as a playoff team as we always have? Because we have, since the beginning, our inaugural year, we have never not made the playoffs. So this will be an interesting push once we start seeing how this team looks. And that's sort of what I wanted to first go into. I mean, obviously, we're post-MLS bubble. We've gained some new players, some rumored players who have already posted photos in front of Mercedes-Benz. So let's go ahead and go into it. Obviously, Jürgen Damm was the one that we knew about going into the MLS bubble. And then Eric Kubo Torres, the striker, after we put Joseph, unfortunately, on a season-ending injury. Are we excited to see these two guys possibly take the field tomorrow?
Yeah, I think possibly is the best way to put it. Dom's probably a little bit further along fitness-wise. He got here a little bit earlier. Kubo Torres got here just a little later. And, I mean, you've got 6 games coming up in 3 weeks, so you've got to balance the need for getting these guys in the lineup. You went out and got them for a reason. They're both impact kind of players. But you don't want to push them too much too quickly. So do you ease them in? Do you play one, maybe not the other? Do they come off the bench tomorrow? I'm waiting to see that lineup. This is the most anticipated lineup that I've been waiting on in quite a while.
And to Jason's point, as I was sitting here trying to figure out my lineup, and for those watching on Twitch, that's what I was trying to figure out. That's all that chicken scratch down there at the bottom. I am looking forward to seeing Jürgen Damm and how his speed translates on the turf at MBS. I'm looking forward to seeing Kubo Torres, and they were both smart pieces of business by the front office for Atlanta United. I think that they are eased in. That's just what I'm thinking. once again, when I say something as a personal opinion, usually if you can go to the inverse, that's usually what's going to end up happening, just as a rule. But looking forward to seeing Dom and his speed. Looking forward to seeing Cubo Torres, and hopefully, as he has said, he wants to regain that form that he had in MLS that wasn't a part of his game down in Liga MX, because he wants to continue a career. He wants to get looks for national team duty. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they integrate. I don't have them in my starting 11. I do see them, because of schedule compression, getting a cup of coffee tomorrow, getting integrated, getting used to all those associations and the little societies that Jason likes to talk about. So looking forward to seeing how they integrate on the whole. I don't have them in my starting lineup tomorrow, but I do have them making appearances.
Now, we'll talk about starting lineups a little later in the show, because I know that's pretty much what everybody looks to hear and what we imagine the game playing out like tomorrow. But there is actually a big bit of business that I feel like we need to hit on and talk a little bit about. Obviously, it's the very massive elephant in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Is Stephen Glass, now the interim manager of Atlanta United after Frank de Boer, and I will say in air quotes, mutually parted ways. Obviously, if you've been seeing social, I believe it was yesterday, Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic dropped a bomb of an article. He had the one-on-one with Frank de Boer, in which Frank talked about the mutual parting of ways, in which he said was not so mutual, but he was willing to accept what the decision had been. What are your thoughts on that article? Obviously, other things came out where he was intending on going back into the season, trying to rework what was going on. And, both Carlos Bocanegra and Darren Eales just felt like there wasn't a way forward with Frank. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good piece from Felipe Cardenas. It's a good get to connect with Frank. He's back in the Netherlands now, and give Frank a ton of credit for taking the interview and being open without, being like we've seen a lot of times in these kind of situations. You start sniping back and forth. There was none of that. I thought Frank was very fair in what he had to say. I think he gave you some insight into the way he saw things, which we had not had really up until this point. It kind of reiterates how I've felt about the whole thing for quite a while. Frank de Boer is a good manager. Frank de Boer, didn't, back his way into 2 trophies last year. He made the right adjustments. He did a good job last year. He did a good job winning 4 titles at Ajax in the Eredivisie, which had never been done before. He's got a future ahead of him as a manager if he wants to have that. The personalities never meshed here, and he never got what he wanted 100% of the time from the players. And he is to blame for some of that as well. Like, Frank is to blame, the players are to blame, and they've said the same. This doesn't happen if things aren't wrong, and it's very rare that you're in a situation where it's one thing that's wrong. It's one player, it's just the manager, you're just not having this position. This is a team sport, obviously, and this is a collective unit that things were failing. I think what Frank said about his thing on the whole thing about instruction and the players saying they wanted more tactical instruction, and Frank said that he understood, from what Felipe was saying in the questioning, he got it, and he said, yeah, the players might have wanted that more. He expected the players to be further along. And he said that multiple times last year, that he wanted to have this group of players to the point that they are adjusting to things in the match on their own. And that's something Stephen Glass has said to us as well about Atlanta United too. You can't really coach from the sideline very much. It's just a fact. When you get to this level, players have to be able to make decisions for themselves. Now, if they're not being prepared, that's a different conversation. But they also have to make adjustments on the fly as well. I don't know where the breakdown was, but there was one, obviously. I think the results show that, and I think the words back and forth show that. But I hope, for Frank's sake, that he gets the job that he wants to get going forward. I think he has a future in this. I think he did a good job here, but he couldn't do the ultimate job that was desired because it never clicked with him and the players. It just never clicked. That wasn't going to start clicking at this point. That part was done, and you had to move on. And now it's up to Stephen Glass to come in, knowing what happened. And now, I think it helps Stephen in a lot of ways to hear Frank's perspective on it. I don't know if they ever had that conversation. Now he has even more insight in how to manage this group of players because Steven comes in to fix things and to get this back on track to get into the playoffs. So I think he has the right personality to do it. I don't think you'll have that disconnect, and I'm excited to see how that relationship builds.
Okay. John, before we get into obviously talking about Glass taking the position and how he might serve as interim, what were your thoughts on the article and what Frank had to say?
Well, and I mean, Jason hit a lot of the same points that we've talked about on the morning show. But for me, I think from a personality standpoint, I think that I came out of reading this piece from Felipe, and I liked Frank that much more as a person because of how forthright he was, because of how honest he was about the situation, because of how he opened up. Because in a lot of these situations with managers or coaches or whatever, regardless of the sport, you're going to have them shun an interview. They're going to give you stock quotes. They won't give you a whole lot of insight, and it will have just been a bunch of words that are put on a page. I think that what you got with Frank and Felipe is you got a lot of insight that you don't normally get in other sports. And I think that what that does is that, once again, it reinforces that I like Frank as a person that much more, and it reinforced my thoughts about him as a person coming through in this interview about how open and honest he was about everything that happened in his tenure here.
But did you think, as Jason was saying, that sometimes it's not just one particular thing between a club and a coach and the players? It's maybe just not a fit altogether.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it like the relationships that we all have growing up. Sometimes you're dating someone, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. They don't wear the right. It's like they don't wash their clothes. They don't go to the laundry. They don't do dry cleaning. You don't like the food they eat. Those kinds of things. Sometimes the chemistry just isn't there for whatever the reason is, and it just doesn't work. And then you just sit there and understand that this relationship isn't working. You have the talk, and it's like, hey, I need to have the talk. You never like to hear those words, but we need to talk. And that's what happened in this case. And you had the breakup, and that's where we are.
Exactly. Now, you guys are very familiar with former Atlanta United 2 coach Stephen Glass, man of many nicknames, Glass, Glassy. Of course, we're going to call him just by Glass, obviously, because he's got a big game tomorrow. His first MLS debut. Obviously, he's very familiar with the players. Although I have seen, and as he said yesterday in his presser, I believe, that he's actually started refamiliarizing himself with players, obviously rewatching Pity's tapes from Argentina, and looking back at seeing what these players do and where they fit well. And for two men such as yourselves that call Atlanta United 2 games, you're very familiar with how he works as a coach. How do we expect him to be different in his first MLS debut tomorrow?
I don't think he'll be different. I mean, this is a big thing for him as a manager, but he's been in these situations before at a top-flight club. I mean, this is a guy with serious Premier League experience, with serious experience in the top flight in Scotland as a player. Now, as a manager, it's a little bit different. It's going to be really different for all of us tomorrow with no fans in the building, so it's going to have a weird feel to begin with. Maybe that's a little bit easier to transition into for Stephen Glass. I'm not sure. He's excited about the opportunity. I think he has a very good feel for what Atlanta United is and what it's supposed to be. I mean, this is somebody who was brought in on the academy side first, then became the manager for Atlanta United 2. And one thing that Steven and Tony Annan have both talked about, and when you look at a club, I think it's easy to get blinded by the first team because that's what we're all paying the most attention to. But what the real heart and soul and DNA and bloodlines are of a club is the academy, the reserve team. Because the academy is the spot where you're going to have players come through for the longest period of time, most likely. They could be in the academy for 5-6 years, maybe longer sometimes. And then the next step is with the twos. And the twos here are definitely an extension of the academy. That's where you build who Atlanta United is. So two people in Tony Annan, who's now the interim manager for the twos, Stephen Glass, who will go back to the twos when his interim spot is done here with the first team. Those are two guys who understand what this club's supposed to be. So I think he's going to help get them back there. And he's talked about it with us on broadcasts and ahead of broadcasts. He wants teams to be intense. He wants teams to be aggressive. He wants teams to control matches and make the opponent uncomfortable. Tactically, he's not married to playing a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2. It's what suits that group of players. He's very flexible in that. But it is intensity, it is aggressiveness, and it is control of the match.
John, as well, you've obviously called Atlanta United 2 games. You've seen Glass in action. Mm-hmm. The team, obviously, that he's coaching is a little different. Do we see him, obviously, as Jason said, promoting this attacking style of play, making the opponent feel uncomfortable? Do we see maybe these bleeding in and trickling to what every Atlanta United fan has wanted for some bit of time, is this aggressive style of attacking that we had with Tata?
I think that's the million-dollar question. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Stephen Glass puts his stamp and his personality into this roster and how it's translated over the last couple of weeks, where they've had the time to work on those characteristics that Stephen wants to have as head coach. And for me, we all know that we see the photos, we see social media, we see what Atlanta United does on a daily basis, releasing the photos and the quick videos of drills and things like that. Now that we get to see this group come together on the field for a game that means something, that involves points, how is all of this work and all of this, the integration that Stephen Glass has put together, how does it all fit? And I think that's going to be the fun part when you're looking at the analysis. I know that Atlanta United fans are looking for the intensity and the high power and the scoring and all that kind of stuff. How does it translate, and how has it translated? I think that's going to be the interesting part for me, is all of this integration, all of this practice, all of the stuff that these guys have been doing and getting to become acquainted with one another. How does it translate in a very tough match coming out of the blocks? That's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Now, that leads us into a good question. We obviously, if we're talking about making the opponent feel uncomfortable, we should talk about the opponent, right? So Nashville has already played 2 games. Obviously, they were not able to participate in the MLS bubble due to coronavirus issues. They played 2 games against FC Dallas that also had coronavirus issues. Both teams are now cleared and coronavirus free, thankfully. So we can start playing MLS matches and get this regular season underway. But let's talk about Nashville versus FC Dallas, because I think this is going to be the biggest indicator of what we could see tomorrow. So from what I saw, obviously FC Dallas has always been sort of an attacking team. They're going to make the back line be a little bit on their back heel, but it was a solid defensive performance from Nashville. Do we see, obviously with Gary Smith coming in as a more defensive coach to begin with, do we see us having to battle that defensive back line?
Yeah, you will. I mean, 258 straight minutes that they have not conceded, going back to week 2 of the season against Portland, where they conceded early and couldn't find an answer. They're a very good defensive team, but they don't necessarily do it by just sitting back. This is not Cincinnati defensive work where it is just everybody behind the ball. That's all we're doing. They will get up and press. And that second game, they pressed Dallas a whole lot more than the first game. Dallas also tried to build out of the back more in the second game, inviting some of that pressure. I think this is a group that, center back, they're very solid. Walker Zimmerman's one of the best in the league. Dave Romney's maybe one of the more underrated guys in the league. Out wide, Daniel Lovitz can get forward. He can threaten you from the left side. He's very aggressive going forward. He's very aggressive defensively as well. The right side's the big question. Eric Miller didn't really look good early in the season. He's injured with a groin injury. I think they're going to try him physically tomorrow morning and see how he's feeling. He might not make the trip. I don't know how he handles a 4 to 5 hour bus ride and then play that evening. I think that's going to rule him out. We saw 2 different options, and I think there's a third one too. So Brian Beckoulis is a veteran Honduran who's played a lot in the middle but can play on the right. He played it in the first game against Dallas, and it was Jalil Anibaba who played it in the second game, primarily a center back. He stayed home for the most part. Alistair Johnson, rookie from Wake Forest, a Canadian young player who's pretty dynamic. He's played a lot of right back in college. He played as the right winger on the Sunday match or Monday morning match. He played as the right winger there. He can play as the right back and maybe give you a little more of a dynamic look if you want to go in that direction. You can stay home with Anibaba. Beckoulis is kind of the in between the two. That's one of the lineup things I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
And for me, if you look at that lineup, with the right-hand side being the questions, what does the left-hand side look like for Atlanta United to attack that right-hand side? So it's all about the pointer count of all of this. And so if it's going to be either inexperience or youth or a combination of both on that right-hand side, what is Atlanta United to do down the left to combat that youth? And also remember, Jason mentioned it, the fact that the game was Monday morning. And so they got home about 7 o'clock Eastern time on Monday morning. It's one day less of having to work toward match fitness and match readiness. How ready will they be coming out of the blocks with that late night in Dallas, losing probably a day in training, getting ready for this match against Atlanta United? I think that, I want to
I don't know. I think that's overrated. That was Monday. I mean, this is going to be Saturday. I think you've caught up by now. I think, honestly, playing games is going to help them a whole lot more than getting out of Dallas 5 hours later than they would have. I think they're going to be in some rhythm coming in. And, Gary Smith's got some decisions to make. What that right side looks like, I don't think he's decided on his starting 11. He's looking at the schedule as well with 6 games in 3 weeks. He's going to have to rotate his squad. What does he do to try to affect Atlanta United in this? And where Atlanta's in a good spot is Gary Smith doesn't know what is going to be the lineup. He doesn't know what the shape's going to be. He doesn't know what the style of play is going to be. Nobody does. So Gary really can't adjust based off of what he thinks he's going to see. He's guessing like the rest of us.
Right. Now, we talked a lot about Nashville as a defensive side, and obviously that is part of the biggest part of almost their dynamic, but they also have some great players, obviously, in the attack, right? Mukhtar is always going to be a problem going forward. You have a Calm, obviously, that has punished us before. And then you've got Godoy that has that ability to move and put himself in spots that really will punish a back line. Now, do we see Mukhtar having space against the likes of Miles or Meza or Escobar in the back line, or do we shut them down again? Because another key point that I've noticed between both of the games between FC Dallas and also what we have seen playing Nashville ourselves is that set pieces is a real threat with this team. And we defensively haven't always been great against set pieces. So do we see that being a factor in this game?
I'll let John take set pieces. Mukhtar is a really talented player. And he's a guy who, as a designated player, you see the list of designated players in this league and you're like, hi, Mukhtar. What? Who? 11 key passes. He's leading the team there. He averaged a goal or assist every 2 games at Brøndby, his previous club, and that's top 10 kind of production in MLS in terms of attacking midfielders. He was the Superliga Player of the Season in Denmark in 2018. This is a guy who can play, and what I like about him is he's not really stuck in one position, and it's something that Gary Smith has talked about with him. He would play right back if that's what the game called for. He would play left back. He would play goalkeeper if that's what it called for. He'll do whatever it takes for the team. And you need players like that when you're an expansion team. But what that means in this game is you've got 2 guys behind him in Anibal Godoy and Dax McCarty who form the spine of this group. That's the base in the midfield. That gives Mukhtar incredible freedom to go find space. I don't think it's going to be the back line for Atlanta United who's going to be worried about him as much as the midfield. And that's where that's the number one thing I'm looking at when the lineups come out is what does the holding midfield look like for Atlanta? Because they're going to have a lot to deal with in Hani Mukhtar.
And when you're talking about set pieces, it is a concern. And when you have folks who can come up from the back and be inside the area like the Zimmerman and Romney and Lovitz and all of that collective weight that they can bring in, it is a concern for me. But once again, it just comes down to marking and assignments. And I know that sounds incredibly simplistic from my point of view, but
No, it's not simplistic at all. I mean, that's how we conceded the goal against Nashville in the first place. It was a bad setup between Joseph and I believe it was Zimmerman or
it was Zimmerman.
Zimmerman, yeah.
It was a bad matchup, so that's an extremely important point of set pieces.
So, yeah, I mean, so when you go back to matchup number one, and so you look at a guy like Walker Zimmerman, you look at that back line and how they could be integrated in the area off the set piece, it is naturally a concern.
Now, this bleeds into, obviously, that question of are we going to defend against this midfield? How will our back line look? What will our attack look? Let's just take it bit by bit, section by section, and really dissect and discuss this, because we actually, as I was looking over the show notes today, have a vast pool of directions we can go. And I think that makes us very dangerous when coming into games like this, because we have players that have the ability to play multiple positions, and we have the ability to sort of change the way we look as well. So obviously, I'm assuming between the post is Guzan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty quick call. All
yep.
Right. Backline, maybe we should talk about formation first. Do we see us playing the 4-3-3 or 3-4-3 or?
I think it'll be a line of four. I'm not 100% on that, because you could go in any direction. As you said, you've got the depth and you've got the roster to play anything you want here. But I think a 4 in the back gives you a little more freedom. Now, against Nashville, I think you can pull that off a little bit easier, because they're going to play one up top, and Mukhtar's going to kind of float behind. So you don't need 3 center backs there. 2 will suffice. Miles Robinson, Fernando Meza, I think, are your 2. The question, if you go to 4, because we've seen the 3-4-3 all year, the question if you go to 4 is Franco Escobar or Brooks Lennon at right back. And if Brooks Lennon's not the right back, does he play right wing, because he can do that? Or does he start on the bench? And he's a big acquisition. You know, he's a player that I thought played well in Orlando as well. He brings a lot of energy to this group. I think he absolutely fits the way Stephen Glass wants to play. But when you start changing the shape, that brings up different questions from what we've seen so far this season. It's going to be down to Stephen Glass to figure this group out, and maybe not who are the best 11 players, but what is the best fit for 11 players with this group. That might leave somebody out that we'd be surprised by.
Right, like Gallagher, obviously, that also has the ability to slot in that position as well.
Gallagher's a guy that Stephen Glass knows really well, and that's another factor here when you start thinking about lineup. You think about guys who've spent a lot of time with Atlanta United too, and John Gallagher's one, and Gallagher was also at Stephen Glass's. Another one. Yeah, at Bello, Mo Adams. There's quite a few, but Glass has a relationship with those guys, and he knows what to expect from them, maybe more than he knows what to expect from a Brooks Lennon, from a Franco Escobar. So that could factor into the lineup as well. You're going to see everybody, I think, that we've talked about play in the next 6 games. I think with the amount of games in a short period of time, you're going to see a lot of different bodies out there. Who starts it? My guess is Escobar at right back and Lennon at right wing, because I don't know if Jurgen Damm's going to be ready to go straight out of the gate. That can ease him in and have him come off the bench in game 1. Okay.
And then are we seeing Bello on the left side? Then if we're looking at a back line of 4, are we looking at Walks?
Or Castillo. Or Mulroney, I think, is more of the long shot, and that's where you're at here. The safest bet, I think, is George Bello. I know a lot of people, I guess, have soured on Bello, which I don't understand at all. You're talking about one of the most promising young players, period, and there's all these questions about him. You want him to play, and you've got to understand that he's going to make some mistakes. He's a young player who has played a very limited amount of time at the first division level, but he doesn't get better if you don't play him. And he has the potential to be a U.S. men's national team left back, in my opinion. I think he has that ability. He's got to get better defensively. He's got to finish his opportunities in the final third. But to see what he's doing at a young age, you've got to roll with that sometimes. And a game like this, I think, suits him, because Nashville's not going to be going forward a ton. Now, he's going to have to be switched on when the play transitions. He's got to get back quickly. He can't have those moments of hesitation.
Right. John, do you see the back line looking the same, or did you see anything different as far as Bello, Meza, Miles, and Escobar?
Yeah, I had Bello, Meza, Miles, and Escobar, and I had Lennon on the right-hand side playing in front of Escobar. And I'll save my other two before the midfield discussion. But I had Bello Meza, Miles, and Escobar. And as Doug referred to Miles this morning as the one-man breaker upper. And with Nashville,
what does that mean?
A one-man. Basically, he can handle himself. He's got everything locked down.
Yes. Yeah.
He can anything comes his way, he can lock it down. So that was the Doug Robertson term for Miles Robinson, the one-man breaker upper. But I had Bello Meza, Miles, and Escobar at the back.
You don't ever want to put him in that position because that's just not what you want. But he does have that ability on one-on-ones.
But that's the balancing act, though. I mean, that's the thing is you don't want to put him in that position, but you don't want to be afraid of putting him in that position. And if you're going to get numbers forward and you're going to play on the front foot, like I think Stephen Glass wants his team to play, and like everybody has talked about, you're going to risk opportunities. There's just no way around it. I mean, we can look at the Champions League for examples of this. You've seen teams that have decided, and then you look at how teams played, Lyon and PSG as a prime example. Pep Guardiola talked about not wanting to put his center backs in foot races because he didn't trust them to win a foot race. Miles Robinson, you trust to win a foot race, so you can take a chance with him. But also, I mean, going into the Champions League final this weekend, you've heard Hansi Flick from Bayern Munich talk about, like, I've got to change a little bit because their attack is so good. You don't want to have what nearly happened to them in the semifinal, where they gave up a ton of chances early. Things could have been different if you have one of those goals go against you. You were very risky. Miles is the kind of center back, though, that you can afford to risk more with because of that speed, because of that range he can cover. So you've got him there. I really think what we're going to see now, and I've talked about Fernando Meza as the Michael Parkhurst replacement, since we want to call everybody somebody's replacement. Yeah. Meza is the Parkhurst replacement. Robinson has grown into the LGP replacement. And when you go back and look at the way they played four in the back in 2017 and 2018 when they were in the 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, that's the template, if you want to compare it, is Meza replacing Parkhurst with the intelligence reading the game, the passing, the organization. Robinson is the more physical center back who can clean things up and protect the more veteran center back in Meza.
Yeah. John, Meza to me is very much like you said, Jason. It is more of like a parky figure. Obviously, Miles has that ability to be physical with any player that he comes against and snuff out any issues, obviously, as that one-man breaker upper, as you so duly mentioned. But
doesn't he need a bounty sponsorship to be the one-man picker upper?
Yeah, well, that's picker upper, not breaker upper.
That's what I said. Picker upper. He needs a sponsorship. We can change that really easily. We're creating it now.
Good. We'll get the man some extra.
That's what I'm saying.
But Meza to me seems to be the calming seas on the rough waters that is Miles Robinson. So I do see what Jason's saying, and I absolutely agree. I think Meza has been a true joy to watch. I feel like he is that calming presence on the back line, especially when you look at obviously Miles being a little bit more physical, and then also Escobar being at some points and sometimes a live wire. So it's nice to have that sort of veteranship on the back line.
Yeah, and that's that yin and yang that we talk about, where you have youth off to your left. You can be that counsel to Bello and sit there and help him through situations. Be there to constantly go back and forth with him and keep him, just keep him a part of the conversation. Keep him engaged. Be encouraging when you need to, and be the traffic cop back there. With Miles, you've got the free safety who can go, and he can go one-on-one with the number one receiver if we want to mix in American football. And you've got your strong safety in Meza who can be back there to help things out, and he can go to either side and lock down the receivers when he needs to. And then you've got the fiery presence at the back with Escobar. And once again, we talk about yin and yang. You can be the guy to calm him down and draw him away from the gentleman with the whistles if need be when it comes to activities and being somewhat vocal about them. So now that's why I think having that veteran presence back there can help out with all of those other guys in different ways.
Right. Great segue, because let's talk about the midfield. And do we see a veteran presence in the midfield with possibly having Big Red sit there right above the back line as another defensive measure against Mukhtar?
Wouldn't surprise me at all. I think that's going to be the toughest decision for Stephen Glass in the lineup is the holding midfield, because you have Mo Adams and Jeff Larentowicz, who are your most defensively minded options there. You have Eric Remedi, Emerson Heineman. Remedi's more defensive. Heineman can get forward really well. You have Mateo Sosetu, who can factor in there, but he's going to get forward more. You want him to get forward more. So, which combination has the best chemistry, and which one's going to give you the most protection? I kind of have this in my head that it could be Eric Remedi in the most defensive spot, in the number 6 spot, but I would be more worried if that's the case, because then that limits some of what makes him so good. You like to see him be able to step forward and go hunting for the ball. If he's got to protect the back two, you have concerns about that, because then everything gets disjointed. Larentowicz is going to sit more. Mo Adams can sit more. I think maybe as you ease into this, you need one of them to get the start here. But Remedi's going to play some in that role in the 6-game phase. I think he will. But you can talk me into Jeff Larentowicz being the starter here, no problem, because then he becomes that coach on the field that I think we saw was lacking in Orlando.
Yeah. Now, I support Big Red, obviously, as well, because I do feel like he has that better presence, and this is where I'm going to ask you, John. But I actually have Mo Adams sitting in that slot currently, just because of I hate to say this, but the little bit more of a youth presence there with speed. And although Larry is extremely fit, it's just this idea of youth. And I know that Mo has worked extensively with Glass, so I thought that Mo would get that spot instead of Larry. What are you seeing, John?
Well, I'll show you how it was here on my sheet. You see how many things that have been crossed off? That's what my decision-making process was in the midfield. And I was torn on Larentowicz and thought that perhaps if you brought him in, say, 65th or 70th, to be that physical presence and to be that extra body in the back to help lock things down. I went back and forth on Remedi. I had Mo Adams as my final decision, and an Adamsy Larentowicz hybrid kind of a thing. And so if Most gives you the start, he goes 65. Larentowicz comes in, finishes the deal. And then I had Heineman and Lennon as my other two there in the middle. But yeah, I was trying to figure out.
Wait. You have Lennon in the middle?
No, I in the middle three that we're talking about in that second.
You
section.
said Lennon in the middle. I'm trying to make sure.
I think he Lennon on the right wing, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
In our middle three, I'm missing modifiers, which I'm really good at.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
So he's talking about a 4-1-3-2.
No, I don't think anybody's playing 2 up top.
No, okay. I had it as a 4-3-3 ish, and I had Adams, Heineman, and Lennon as my.
That's what I'm saying. Lennon's not playing in the middle 3. It ain't happening.
No.
Okay, you're totally confusing me. Let me try to fix this real quick.
Sure.
4-3-3. When I say 4-3-3, and people will nail it down to 4-2-3-1 or 4-1-4-1, it's all the same thing. What you're looking for in shapes and formations, just to keep it real basic, are they playing 2 center backs or 3? And we think they're going to play 2 here. So that means you've got 2 outside backs. That's a line of 4. The other option is to have 3 center backs, which can either look like 3 in the back or 5 in the back, depending on your wide players and where they're positioned. You're going to have to make a decision between 2 central midfielders or 3, and most teams are going to 3 now. It can be done with 2. We saw the 3-4-3 with 2 kind of, but you had the 3-4-3 that was really more like a 3-4-2-1 because Pitti and Barco were in front of the 2 holding midfielders, and when it worked, they were all connected. In Orlando, when it didn't work, they were disconnected. There was no connection between that box of midfield. In this case, I think it's going to be a 4-3-3 position, not a 4-3-3-ish. I think this is what's so hard about formations, because you can define it so many different ways but be saying the same thing. And that's why formations are so overrated. Because in this team, let's talk about function more than shape. When you have the midfield in a 4-3-3, you're going to need one midfielder to be the most defensive midfielder of the group. the number 6, if you will, if you want to go by that kind of numbering. That's going to be the player that when you're in possession and you're dropping back to build up possession, that's the one that drops between the two center backs. We've seen Jeff Larentowicz do that. We've seen Mo Adams do that. We've seen Eric Remedi do that. But that's going to be the one who is consistently dropping between the two center backs. You generally, with this team, and I'd be surprised if you don't, you also have as a counterpoint a number 10, a playmaker who is the attack-minded midfielder. He's not coming back as much. Then, depending on your team, that third midfielder is what can change it. Some teams will play another attacking midfielder. Some teams will play another defensive midfielder. And some teams will play somebody who's in between, an 8, a mix. A mixed midfielder who's going to drop back and help, but also get forward and be kind of that last guy running into the box. I think that's the kind of function that we're talking about here. So when you're talking about it in that way, your defensive midfielder is going to be one of Jeff Larentowicz, Mo Adams, Eric Remedi. And I think it could be any of the three, to be perfectly honest.
Let's talk about the number 8 then, if we're in that discussion. Who do you guys have as that sitting number 8 for tomorrow?
Well, that's what's weird is the 8, because I do think they'll have to have that mix. I don't think it'll be a pure 4-1-4-1, which would be 2 attacking midfielders. I don't think it'll be a straight-up 4-2-3-1 with 2 defensive midfielders. I think somebody will have to be the one that makes it a 4-1-4-1 when you attack, but the one who makes it a 4-2-3-1 when you defend. That could be Remedi, because he's played that role quite a bit for this team. That could be Heinemann, who's played that role a good bit with this group. It could be Adams, because he can get forward out of that defensive role. He's going to be more defensive than Heinemann would, obviously. I think it could be Hosetu as well, and that would open up a lot of different doors in the attack if he can give you enough defensively. Maybe that's a little too risky. My guess is it's Heinemann.
That was my guess as well, and I don't think we've seen enough of Hosetu to really know defensively what we should be expecting from him.
Yeah, the time that I've seen him in that role was in a preseason friendly with the 2s, and he was paired up with Will Riley, who was the 6 in that scenario. And they were against Birmingham, and which is good competition, but it's not a regular season match. He can give you enough defensively. He played that role in Brazil a lot, so he's got it in him. We just haven't seen him do it with this group, and maybe it's a little bit too much too soon for that.
Right. John, did you also see Heinemann then sitting above your Mo Adams?
Yeah, that was how I had it thought out. As Adams would be my more defensive midfielder, Heinemann would be my more offensive type of those two.
Wait a minute. Okay, now, John, this is where you're confusing me again. Is he the 8 or the 10 for you?
He's saying the 8. He's saying more offensive but defensive as well. So he's saying a mix of the 8.
If we're talking 6, 8, 10, you've got Adams as the 6, Heinemann as the 8.
Yes.
Who's the 10?
Lennon.
Lennon's not going to play the 10. Lennon's a wide player.
No.
Lennon's only going to be on the wide. That's going to be Pitti. It's going to be Barco. It could be Heinemann. You could see a scenario where you play Heinemann as a 10, and you play 2 more defensively oriented midfielders.
We're looking at Remedi and Mo then at that point in time if Heidemann's playing as the 10?
Could be Remedi and Mo, could be Remedi and Jeff, could be Jeff and Mo. I mean, you've got that flexibility, and I don't know what this pairing's going to be. This is what turns everything for me, because... Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that would be really interesting if we do see, as Heinemann has said, obviously, when talking to the pressers, that he's been moved forward with more attacking players. So there is a possibility we could see him as a 10, because as we also know, Pitty's been playing more on the left wing. So then we can see a Barco on the right wing, Pitty on the left, and then a Heinemann sitting in centrally between them.
But see, then when this is where it gets tricky, because, and this is why sometimes having a lot of talent can drive you crazy if you're in this role, because if you go that direction, which is very feasible, I think could work. If Heinemann's your 10, you're playing Pitti and Barco, unless there's something wrong with either one of them. They're going to play. And you'd have to put them out wide in that scenario. So that takes a spot for Dom, that takes a spot for Lennon, that takes a spot for Mulroney. That takes spots away from others, because then your number 9 is going to be Kubo Torres or Adam John or J.J. Williams. And I think in this game it's either John or Kubo Torres. So that would have Dom off the bench, and in this scenario that have Lennon off the bench, which is possible. Like, that's the thing, is it's very possible. I don't know if you go in that direction, because I think Heinemann can give you attacking presence from a deeper position. You can play Pitti or Barco as the 10. Generally, it's been Pitti, but he can play out on the wing as well. Barco can play out on the wing and come inside. Those two can be interchangeable at wherever they start. Not too worried about it. The right side is another big question because it could be Jürgen Damm if he's ready to give you 60-plus minutes. It could be Brooks Lennon, which protects you a little more defensively because he can drop and he's comfortable doing that. Could be Jake Mulroney with his speed. You've got a lot of possibilities there, and that and the holding midfield, the 6-8. Those are the three positions that my eyes are immediately going to go to when the lineup comes out, that I'm going to try to figure out who's in that role and what that means for the personality of the team.
Right. So right now we're sitting at, obviously, 4 on the back line. We've got Bello, Meza, Miles, and Escobar. Our midfielders, as we all, I think, have agreed, is either Larry or Mo, Heinemann. And then now let's talk about that, the other 4 that we now have to fill out pretty much. So are we looking at Pitti in the number 10 above Heinemann, and we're having Barco out on the left, Lennon out on the right with a striker? What was your prediction, John, for the rest of the lineup?
Well, I had Pitti on the left, Barco on the right, and John up top.
Right. And you had Lennon on the right, or who?
No, he had Lennon as a number 10, which makes no sense.
I had Lennon as a 10, which made no sense.
That would be very bold if that happens. I'll send the Carvel ice cream machine down to you if that happens.
There you go.
All right. So Pitti, Jason, do you think Pitti's playing as a 10, or can we actually possibly see him as on the left side as he has been saying?
You could see either one. The thing about Pitti, I mean, if he's the 10 and you have Heinemann and whoever with him, you've got protection. Like, you want him to be free. So if he's the 10, he's not going to stand in the middle of the park all night. That's just not how he plays. And that's fine. If you have players like that, you want them to go find the game. Watch Hani Mukhtar. Mukhtar will pop up out wide. He'll pop up, right in between the two center backs. He'll be ahead of Dominic Badji at times. He'll also drop deep into the midfield and be next to Dax McCarty and Anibal Godoy. You want Pitti to have the freedom to go wherever he feels like the game is for him. And a lot of times, if you watch him throughout matches, he'll start centrally, and he'll start to drift out wide at times. Now, what's really good about this group is you have a player in Ezequiel Barco who does that in the inverse. He will start out wide and come inside. You see his movement a lot of times on the ball, carry him inside on the dribble. He'll come in, and then they just interchange. So if it's Barco standing centrally to start and Pitti out wide, it's not going to always look like that. So it could be either way. I mean, honestly, I'm not too worked up about that part of it. I'm questioning more who's on the other side, because those two will be interchangeable. Will you be interchangeable with the third option in that attacking 3 in the midfield behind the forward? I have to see who it is.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see the lineup. Now, one of the questions I do also have, because I think it's an important conversation for us to have, MLS obviously has mandated and allowed 5 subs now, ever since MLS is back. So we have the ability to completely change the lineup pretty much with that 5 sub substitution. Do we see Castro playing a point in a substitution? Do we see, obviously, like we have said, Mulroney coming in with the power legs and the speed that he has and just blowing by people who are a little tired from having played 2 matches prior. And then maybe now in the 60th, 70th minute, they have to go against fresh legs Mulroney and are just blown by like the Roadrunner. I mean, do we see these power subs coming on, and who can we see those power subs being? I agree with you, as we had stated earlier. I don't think Kubo is physically ready to play 90 minutes. Is he physically ready to play 60? Not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
It will be interesting. I mean, obviously the trainers know that, but I think we see him tomorrow. What time capacity we see him, I'm not entirely sure.
Something you mentioned that's a really interesting thing to look for. If Mulroney and Dom do not start, if you bring them in out wide in the 70th minute, with their pace, they can change the game with speed. And if you have a lead That's great. It simplifies the game for you. Those two, you just keep sending them on runs. You don't have to build up play anymore. You play it into the corners and you let Mulroney and Dom go. If you're chasing the game, you have that speed. And, you look at Daniel Lovitz, who can run. I don't think he can run with Jürgen Damm, but he can keep up. The other side, if it's Anibaba or if it's Beckoulis, they're not running with Jake Mulroney. It's not happening. So you think back to 2017, and you saw Atlanta United at times when it just wasn't clicking. Start dropping the ball over the top. Start dropping it over the top, and Tito Villalba or Miguel Almiron would chase it down. You've got that option in Dom and Mulroney, and with 5 subs, you can have it set up to tell Lennon and Barco, if those are your 2 wingers, give me 60 minutes before we unleash the hounds on these guys.
Exactly. John, do you kind of see that playing out that way as well?
Yeah, when we were trying to figure out the lineup, and I was processing, was Dom going to start in my 11 or no? I had no. And if you bring him in, you bring Mulroney in, you bring them in late. Jason made the point to have that kind of hellacious speed that you can bring on against tired legs that have been out there a lot longer and having to chase a game or just be active in a game for that long a period of time. And then you bring in that kind of speed. I think that it can be game changing one way or the other if you're trying to chase a goal or if you're trying to lock something down. And I think that we talk about, segment 3 where you're going to be playing 6 matches and in this next run, your depth is going to be tested. You're going to need all this depth. And I think what this does is it gives you that chance to sit there and it's like, okay, in this match, I want to put it away. I'm going to bring these 2 guys on. If I need you to start, then what it also does is it gives Dom that opportunity to warm the engine up and be ready for a possible starting element in the next match or 2. So I think that it for Jürgen Damm, I think that it introduces him in a couple of different ways. One, it integrates him into the side, gets him adjusted into life with Atlanta United, but at the same time, bring him in late and put the pedal down and try to chase him.
Yeah. All right. Jason, do we have any questions from the Twitch?
The Twitch pitch has been very active. One of the questions that has piled up, and I've been answering a bunch, like kind of as we go, a lot of stuff has come up. We had an idea about, since you're going to have a weird pregame tomorrow, MLS has said they're not going to play the national anthem in games where you don't have fans in the stands. This will be one of those. You have the great MLS theme that they're using now that Hans Zimmer blessed us with this year. Love it. It's awesome. I think the teams, at least the home team, needs a walkout song. What would your walkout song be for Atlanta United, Kelly?
Welcome to Atlanta.
Okay. That's a solid, safe option.
That's a standard Atlanta song, I think. Either Welcome to Atlanta or So Fresh and So Clean.
Sets a different mood. That could work.
I mean, those are the songs that I listen to get me ready to go. There's also Bombs Over Baghdad, which I think is I'm pulling a lot of Outkast.
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Hype music is Outkast. Those are my first 3 that have come to mind. I can think of a bunch of different hype music, but I just Welcome to Atlanta is the standard go-to for me if we're doing like a hype song for Atlanta.
John, what song would you pick?
For me, I would go down the professional wrestling vein and pick up one of our entrance music, whether it's Goldberg or Stone Cold Steve Austin or something like that.
Goldberg's would be good.
So that way, with Goldberg being the local, you have that element in there, and then so that was just the first one that popped into my head was the Goldberg entrance music, and then maybe you have him hit the virtual spike up on the Halo board or something like that.
Abby's yelling no wrestling music. Mine would cross over, though, because I'd go with the NWO theme, which is also Jimi Hendrix, Voodoo Child, which is a great song to walk out to and want to run through a wall. If you want to go total hype, I would be very tempted to go with a heavily edited version of Pastor Troy. Let's not do No More Playing GA because the machine gun sounds might be a little much in an empty Benz. Yeah. Mike and I might hit the floor. We'll go with This the City by Pastor Troy.
I think it also probably, if I'm thinking and I'm putting on Atlanta United's thinking cap, obviously no fans in the stands. we want to do a walkout song, my go-to with the cap on would be "We Ready."
Always good.
Yeah.
Always good. You can't go wrong with that.
That way, the players who played in that stadium have that feeling that the fans are in there chanting that song, letting them know that we're ready for them. I think that would be a huge thing. Also, I don't know if they are doing it, but is the Halo board going to have like Zoom faces on it? Or
I don't know. I've heard, I know at least with the Spike presentation, and this is from Doug Robertson's article at the AJC, that fans will be involved, I think, via Zoom with the Golden Spike presentation, and that'll be projected onto the large vertical board behind the supporter section. I don't know on the Halo board how that's going to be used in match. That'll be kind of interesting to see. I'm curious what the audio sounds like, because some teams have talked about it. I believe Sporting Kansas City has said they're going to play crowd noise in the stadium because the players have wanted it. The players want to hear that during the game. The players voted for it. I think a few other teams have done that as well. I haven't heard anything like that. I've heard that I think they have the idea to do the ATL chant at some point that's been recorded, obviously, and use that from a previous game and do that at the 40th and 80th minutes. But beyond that, I don't know. I'm curious to see what it sounds like tomorrow.
Right. It'll be very interesting for sure. All right, to close out, let's go ahead and ask the one big important question that I'm sure everybody loves to hear. Score predictions. Good sirs, what is your call?
I went 2-1. I think Atlanta will find some goals. I think Nashville gives you space to play in, and I think that's where Pitti and Barco can find it. And I think Emerson Hyndman could really end up being key here with making those later runs. He gave Nashville problems with it in Game 1. I do think Nashville will find something, and it'll either be through Mukhtar or it'll be off of a set piece. I don't know if you'll keep them off the board, but I think you'll find two to get the win.
Yeah. John?
I had 1-0. I just thought that it was going to take a little while for both sides to get the engines warm. And Atlanta was going to get one probably in the 55th minute. My guess was going to be Pity Martinez was where I had placed my juice box if you were going to be doing those kinds of things. So I had it 1-0. And those not with us this evening, Nick said it was going to be 3-2 Atlanta with a new manager bump. And Jarrett said 3-1, a new manager bump has them playing free and creating plenty of chances even without new pieces. So I went with the more 1-0, knowing Gary Smith and his stout defense coming in. So I thought that Atlanta would get full points, but it would take a little while.
Yeah. I went with a conservative 1-1. I believe in our team. I've always believed in our team even when we were not doing so well. I know that this team has the conviction to play together. I know that they all want to prove a point. They all want to play for the new manager. They want to prove to MLS that they're still on top. This is a game for pride, honestly, for Atlanta United, from going from the glorious shining golden spike beacon that it was to obviously a lot of doubts about how the team functions and where they'll be at the end of the season. But I think that defensively, Nashville still hold a key in that, and I think again they score off of a set piece. It's a point that we have contention with any team with set pieces. But I do feel like we do as well get a point in. It will be interesting to see what the lineup is. I might change my mind once I see the lineup, but I do think I'm also more interested to see how the subs take effect into the game and what that does to change it. But overall, I still think 1-1. Either way, I see Atlanta coming out of this game with points, whether it be 1 point or 3 points. But it should be a very fun game to watch, and I'm so excited to finally have a game back. Oh my Lord!
How are you watching this tomorrow?
So I am currently I'm not positive for Corona, but I'm going to see my family in a little over a week. So I have decided just automatically do a standard mandated quarantine.
Yep.
So like in my office here, I've literally sat in a secluded room and like nobody's allowed to come to the room with me. If people are in the same room, they've got to wear masks and stand like, so I'm just trying to be as quarantined as possible. So unfortunately, I'm going to be watching on my own couch with my dog right beside me. I don't really get to share the experience with friends. But I'll be online. So
I'll say that's what Twitter's for.
I'll be experiencing it with all of you.
That is what Twitter is for. That is where you're going to be tweeting at what? The Kelly Francis?
At the Kelly
Francis, yep. I'll be tweeting at the Kelly Francis. And John, you'll be tweeting from what?
From inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Oh, that's right. You guys get to be in this. I'm so jealous.
It's going to be weird. I don't know. I mean, if you should feel jealous. Like, it's going to be
weird.
Really strange. I mean, from our perspective, like, we're getting there early because we're doing some stuff on Atlanta United's digital, Mike Conti and I, and we will go in and we will go straight up to our booth and we will stay in our booth. And that's it. You know, there's not going to be the usual, like, even game day stuff that we're used to where we're milling around the press box and talking to folks. I'm going straight to the booth, and that's it. Shutting the door, and Miller Pope will hit anybody who tries to come in.
And there you go. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you guys, obviously Jason and Mike on air and listening to you guys on radio. And then John, hope you get a wonderful seat. Do you get to raise your window also in the press booth?
No, it is hermetically sealed.
So it'll be the same as usual for you.
Yeah, no, but I imagine that I probably will end up having the same seat that I had for MLS Cup, which is basically all by myself in the end zone, all the way around to the end. So that's what it's just going to be. It's going to be an odd bird going in there tomorrow. It really is.
I'll be interested to see what your takeaway from the game was afterwards on the feeling of that big stadium being as empty as it's going to be. It should be quite an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Either way, thank you guys for joining us. This was the run-up, obviously. We are every night before a match, whether it's home or away, we give you all of your insight and information to the game the next day. Thank you for coming. Join us for the next game. I forgot when the next game is.
Tuesday. It's going to be coming fast and furious with the run-up.
Fast and furious from now on, guys. So the next game is on Tuesday, so we'll do our next one on Monday, correct?
No, we'll be Tuesday. Game will be Wednesday. Sorry.
The next one's on Wednesday. That's right. Sorry. So obviously next Tuesday, same time, 7 to 8 p.m. We look forward to seeing you guys on Twitch. Thank you so much for joining.